Tamis here. A Tamis, again, is a tool of refinement. It's covered with a screen, and this screen is very fine. They have different sizes of screens. This one is the finest that you can get, and it's what we call it in America, a drum sieve. Okay, so we're just going to take our bench scraper here with our Tamis and just press it through. Now, much like a ricer, but much finer. Okay, continue that. Very simple, very easy to do. Getting all that potato through that screen. Potatoes, something I think we're all familiar with and we all love. We have a variety of potatoes here for specific reasons and for specific uses. I get very excited when we talk about mashed potatoes. I think we all understand mashed potatoes. We all had mashed potatoes when we were kids. Our parents or our mother would make mashed potatoes with something like this and smash the potatoes while they're in the pot, or you get a little more refined with something like this. And then, of course, there were some of us who were lucky that our parents or mother took the time to use a ricer to make them even more fine. Mashed potatoes in America is something that we traditionally have at holidays, certainly, but they're good every night. The French, on the other hand, have taken mashed potatoes to a higher level and puree potatoes. So it's that sense of refinement, again, that we talk about that the French have taught us so well. But here we have a variety of potatoes. We have some red bliss, which aren't the best choice for mashed potatoes. These are better as a boiling potato. They get really gummy when you mash them. This is a russet, something that we typically bake, which is really the primary use for a russet. They also make great French fries, but they don't make great mashed potatoes. But probably we're very used to mashed potatoes made out of russet potatoes here in America. Here is a Lorette potato, which is a fingerling potato from France, which is really their favorite potato to use for potato puree. It's a very dense potato, so it holds a lot of fat, and that's what we like about mashed potatoes. Is we get a lot of cream into it, a lot of butter into it, but they're hard to find in the States. So what we like to use is a Yukon Gold potato. It was developed in the late 60s. It's a very dense potato, much like the Lorette potato. It's much bigger and really lends itself to making a beautiful puree of potatoes. Okay, so we probably are familiar with making potatoes at home when our parents would peel the potato, dice it up, and then boil it. But that's not the best way to cook potatoes for puree of potatoes. What we want to do is keep them in their jackets, and this prevents absorption of water, which again keeps the flesh, the meat, drier, which allows us to get much more flavor profiles in it through our cream and our butter. Okay? So very simply, we've cooked our potatoes, starting them in cold water, bringing them up to a simmer, and we start them in cold water so that we don't break the skin. The skin's not subjected to a high heat or a change in heat. So we got our potato there. We don't really have to take the jacket off of the potato. We're going to cut it in half here. Again, no resistance, no resistance. We talk about resistance a lot with our vegetables. In this case, we want to make sure there's no resistance with our mashed potato, a hot potato. We have a Tamis here. A Tamis, again, is a tool of refinement. It's covered with a screen, and this screen is very fine. They have different sizes of screens. This one is the finest that you can get. And it's what we call in America a drum sieve. Okay, so we're just going to take our bench scraper here with our Tamis and just press it through. Now, much like a ricer, but much finer. Okay, continue that. very simple, very easy to do. Getting all that potato through that screen and leaving all that skin behind. Okay. Our second potato. And just repeat. You can see how dense this is inside. It's really an aroma of a potato, right? Again, it's those senses that we're using when we're dealing with food that are so important and so much appreciated by us and what we do, the way things smell. There's nothing better than having your sense of smell enlivened by food that we're about to eat. So we want to do this when they're hot, of course, right? Because when they get cold, they get a little gummy as well. So it's just a matter of being able to use your tools so that you don't burn yourself, okay? Okay. Okay, so we have our Tamis here. We're going to just remove our potatoes. And you see I put parchment paper underneath. Again, this is to capture the potato without making a mess. So we always want to work as cleanly as we possibly can. It's very important. Certainly in our kitchens, we become much better cooks by working efficiently and certainly in a clean manner. So we have our puree, our potatoes that have been passed through our Tamis. Very, very fine. Some other things that work really well when you're making purees and a Tamis, almost any vegetable puree, carrots, peas, parsnips, we always put through a Tamis. Okay? So we're just going to add that to our pot. There. Okay, and see how easy that was? Clean up all at the same time. We have our warm cream here. We have our whole butter. We also have some clarified butter. Now, why do we consider clarified butter necessary for potato puree? Well, it's not necessarily necessary for it, but clarified butter has a more pure butter flavor than whole butter has. So we use both of those simultaneously to flavor our potato puree and give it that luxurious mouthfeel. So this is a more intense butter flavor than whole butter, because in whole butter, as you know, it has milk solids in it, so that contributes to diminished flavor of that pure butter flavor that we have. And we all know this from having real buttered popcorn. Okay, so we have our potatoes here. We're still hot. We turn our fire on relatively low, and we're going to begin to emulsify our fats in there. First, we're going to take some cream to start getting it movement. Now, this requires, again, some patience and some time. Puree of potato is not something that you could just make without having some patience and understanding the way the fat is being incorporated into the potato itself. Remember, these are very, very dense potatoes, so they're going to take a lot of fat, and sometimes we're going to actually add some water to it to help us emulsify even more fat into that. Now, I'm not sure how dense you like your potatoes, but in France, they're typically a little thinner than what we would know here as a puree of potato or a mashed potato. So working on and off the fire, whole butter, clarified butter, cream, and water is what we're using here now. We have quantities in our workbook, but with that said, I think what you want to be able to do is to use that as a guide. I think any recipe is a guide, really. And I think you want to use these recipes as guides to accomplishing what you feel is the flavor profile or the texture that you like. Now we can actually continue to get a lot of butter, a lot of fat into this. A lot of cream. Now, there wasn't any salt in our potatoes when we originally boiled them, primarily because the skin's still on the potato and that salt's not going to really penetrate through that skin. We're going to start adding salt as we emulsify or as we add our fat into our potato puree. How much butter, how much fat, how much cream, how much water do you put in there? Really, almost as much as you like. You can see it's starting to get really luxurious in its texture. The color becomes much lighter. But it takes a little bit of effort on your part to get it going and to keep it going. Now be careful again, the heat, as the more butter, the more fat you get in here, the less heat you need. Because the heat will actually break down the emulsification between the fats and the potato. So like before, we talked about with our glazed vegetables and, actually heating it too much so that it actually breaks. If this breaks, in other words, if the fats start to separate from the potato, you can add a little bit of water to it, but certainly take it off the fire. If it starts to break, take it off the fire immediately. Because it's that heat that's causing that. You get a real workout with this. It's a competition, how much fat you can get on the potatoes. Now, of course, as opposed to an American or mashed potato that we're used to, these are much richer. And you can serve this in a number of ways. Obviously, I think the best way to serve it for your family is just serve it as we would our mashed potatoes in a bowl and let people have at it. In our restaurant, of course, we serve it as a garnish for many of our dishes. And it really, because potatoes are such a neutral flavor profile, they marry with almost anything. So now I'm gonna taste it here. Remember, it has no salt in it yet. Oh, it's so good. Start putting salt in it. So seasoning, remember we talked about seasoning earlier. Seasoning being primarily flavor enhancers. So a flavor enhancer is salt and acid. Acid coming from vinegar or acid coming from citrus. We used to think that salt and pepper went hand in hand. In fact, in my first cookbook, I always said season with salt and pepper. Well, that is seasoning, but to enhance the flavor of your food, it's salt and or acid. So you can add pepper to this if you like the flavor of pepper. Remember, salt enhances, acid enhances, pepper changes flavor or adds another flavor to it. So if you want to add pepper to it, by all means, and you can use white pepper, which won't be as apparent in the puree as black pepper would. Pretty good. Okay. We could keep going here. I'm sure I could get some more in there, but I really like the texture and I like the flavor. So you can see how that is coming off the spoon. It's a beautiful puree. Making me hungry. And that's from 2 potatoes. And if it's not enough, we'll just add a little pat of butter there on top. want to show you the difference between a potato puree and a mashed potato. So this is our mashed potato, classic mashed potato, made with Yukon Gold potatoes, but using one of our mashers. Let's taste it. And as nice as that is, and it's a bit rustic. So in other words, you have little lumps of potatoes in it, something that we're all familiar with, and something that, you know, from an emotional connection to our childhood, something that's really relevant. But you'll see the difference. See, it doesn't flow. Now, doesn't that look very familiar to you? And our mashed potato, both made with Yukon Golds, both made with butter, a little bit of cream, and a little bit of terrified.